vice chair, and I'll get us started as soon as Chair Grail shows up. I'll turn it back over to her. The time is now 5:23 p.m. and I'd like to call the November 17th and 18th, 2022 meeting of the Energy Facility Siting Council to order. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Kent Howe,
Here.
Hanley Jenkins,
Here.
Cindy Condon,
Here.
Perry Chalkwood.
Here.
Ann Byer.
Here.
Mr. Vice Chair, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Secretary, are there any agenda modifications?
Mr. Vice Chair, we do have one agenda modification. Due to the shorter time frame between the October and November council meetings, as a result of the Thanksgiving holiday, we were unable to get the October meeting minutes drafted into council early enough for your review. They are close to being done and will certainly be done for the December meeting. That is on the agenda tonight in the consent calendar for one of the votes. But since you have not had a chance to review them yet, there will not be a vote on the October minutes tonight. So that will be deferred to the December meeting. Also, since I'm talking about the meeting minutes and as part of the consent calendar, we are asking you tonight to approve the September meeting minutes once again. So if you recall, during the September council meeting, there was a court reporter. So there was a verbatim transcript associated with the Boardman Hemingway portion of that meeting. And when we asked council to approve those minutes at the October meeting, we hadn't received any verbatim, any Scribner error recommended changes. Subsequent to that vote, we did receive some from Idaho Power Corporation. So we've sent those to you in the packet. You have the meeting minutes that you approved from last meeting. But because of those Scribner error changes, we are requesting that you approve those again and reflecting those Scribner error changes as well. So I just wanted to be clear about that in case it wasn't very clear. So those are the agenda modifications, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Secretary Cornett. So I have the following announcements. Please silence your cell phones. Those participating via phone or webinar, please mute your phone. And if you receive a phone call, please hang up from this call and dial back in after finishing your other call. For those signed onto the webinar, please do not broadcast your webcam. Reminder to council and anyone addressing the council to please remember to state your full name clearly and do not use the speakerphone feature as it will create feedback. For tonight's West End Solar Draft proposed to order public hearing, there are 3 ways to let us know you are interested in providing comments. For those in person, please fill out a comment registration card available on the table near the entrance and submit to Nancy Hatch. For those using the WebEx, you will need to use the raise your hand feature. And for those on the phone only, you will need to press *3, which will alert us that you want to speak. We'll go over these options again during the agenda item. You may sign up for email notices by clicking the link on the agenda or the council webpage. You're also welcome to access the online mapping tool and any documents by visiting our website. Energy Facility Council meetings shall be conducted in a respectful and courteous manner where everyone is allowed to state their positions at the appropriate times, consistent with council rules and procedures. Willful, accusatory, offensive, insulting, threatening, insolent, or slanderous comments which disrupt the council meeting are not acceptable. Pursuant to Oregon Administrative Rule 345-011-0080, any person who engages in unacceptable conduct which disrupts the meeting may be expelled. So we'll move to approval of the September 27th, 2022 meeting minutes with the Scribner errors corrections submitted by Idaho Power Corporation.
This is Hanley. I'll move that we approve those minutes with the Scribner errors.
Got a motion? Do I have a second?
Second. Cindy Condon, second.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Cornett, could you call the roll?
Kent Howe,
Yes.
Ann Byer,
Yes.
Hanley Jenkins,
Yes.
Perry Chalkwood,
Yes.
Cindy Condon,
Yes.
And Chair Brill, I assume you want to recuse yourself on this one. It's the meeting minutes from September with the Scrivener error changes to the Boardman to Hemingway verbatim transcript. So
Yes,
I'm
recusing.
okay. Motion carries. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretary Cornett. It's time for the council secretary report. Then I'm turning it back over to Chair Grail.
Okay. I apologize. In my head, I had 5:30, so I apologize to all of you for being late. Wow, sorry. Yes.
First, I have council member update. Uh, So Richard Devlin has been appointed by Governor Brown to replace Councilmember Jenkins on the council. So Mr. Devlin previously served in the Oregon House of Representatives, representing the 24th District from 1996 through 2000, when he was elected to the Oregon State Senate, representing the 19th District, and served until 2017. He served as the Senate Majority Leader from 2007 to 2010. In October 2017, Mr. Devlin was appointed by Governor Brown to the Northwest Power and Conservation Council and served on that council through 2021. So Mr. Devlin is one of numerous appointees by Governor Brown for the next round of Senate, kind of the Senate Rules Committee evaluation, which will be during the December legislative days on, I think, the 7th through the 9th. So right now, again, he's on the formal list, and should he be confirmed by the Senate, he will replace Councilmember Jenkins. So things are in transition right now at the governor's office, so that's what we know right now. Just wanted to be clear on that. I have a few project updates. First is the Oregon Trail Solar Facility. I provided an update on the amendment. So there's an amendment associated with that project, which would be to extend the beginning construction timeframe, as well as to alter a condition related to cultural resources. The project as approved is a combination of wind and solar facility components not to exceed 41 megawatts, including up to 16 wind turbines or up to 1,228 acres of solar PV energy equipment. The certificate holder is Oregon Trail Solar LLC, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Avangrid Renewables LLC, the U.S. division of the parent company Iberdrola S.A. On August 30th, we received that amendment 1 request. Included in that request was a request for type B review. So under the council's type B review amendment process. On November 10th of this year, the department made the determination that type B review was not justified and that the amendment would be reviewed under the type A process. That determination is based upon the complexity of proposed change, the anticipated level of public interest, and the anticipated level of interest by reviewing agencies. So just as a reminder, for type B review determinations, only the certificate holder can raise that determination by the staff to the council. So if the certificate holder would like, they can request that council or staff's determination be brought to council for your either concurrence, modification, or rejection. So we have not heard that they intend to do that, but that is their option. Next is the Nolan Hills Wind Project contested case. Provided you an update. You've also gotten an update from the hearing officer. So the council appointed hearing officer is Administrative Law Judge Kate Triana, and she has recently issued an order on party status. That was done on November 2nd of this year, and she granted the one requesting party Umatilla County status. So they have status in that contested case, and a pre-hearing conference is currently being scheduled. So dates have already been sent out, and that's being worked on to schedule that right now. There's no questions on those. I'm going to move on to others. So if you can bring up the slide, whoever.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Todd, could you go back on the Oregon Trail Solar? You
Yes.
said there were two issues there for the amendment of the beginning of the construction date. And what was the second one?
There's a condition related to cultural resource monitoring, on-site monitoring. And so they've requested that be changed. And so it was, and I'm-
On-site monitoring during construction.
yes. And so I don't have the details in front of me right now. I'm sure I could ask Sarah to come up and provide more specific details. But it's effectively about on-site cultural resource monitoring during construction, and they're requesting some alteration to that condition.
Thank you.
Good. So on the slide is some information related to the Department of Land Conservation and Development's Farm and Forest Report, or rather their draft Farm and Forest Report. So as you can see on the slide, and I won't read it, but under the statute, the department is required to generate a Farm and Forest Report every 2 years, so just prior to the legislative session. That gets sent to the Land Conservation and Development Commission for their review and approval. Assuming it gets approved, that gets provided to the legislature, again, prior to the long session. So what effectively it does is it evaluates all of the land use approvals on farm and forest ground, during the last 2 years. So it's a compilation of, effectively conversion of the farm and forest lands. And so the current farm and forest specialist, Hillary Foote, drafted it. I sent this out to council, or at least links to the document in its draft form. I've heard from Councilmember Jenkins that he had heard it was approved by the Land Conservation Development Commission today. I don't know if there were any alterations to it, but the link that I provided you was essentially for the LCDC meeting. So if they did provide or make any changes, we'll certainly make note of that and let you know about that. Getting into some of the specifics, so I would encourage you to go look at that. It's not a very long report, and most of it's not related to information associated with what we do, but there is a component related to energy generation projects, which is, I think, very interesting to council. And so I took some of the information from that report and essentially crunched those numbers. And so you can see, and this is specific to solar, so even the energy generation is not solely related to solar, as wind as well, but the information, because mostly what we're seeing is solar projects these days, I thought I would just focus specifically on that. So since 2011, you can see that on exclusive farm use owned land, there has been 167 approved projects. So these are not proposed projects, these are not ones that are in application, these are approved projects. So 167, 85% of those are what I would say, at least from our perspective, relatively small. And they make up only about a third of the total acreage, of all of the projects. So that the remaining 15%, it makes up the remaining 2/3. So the total number of acreage of all of those 167 is 25,276 acres. So 39.5 square miles. So these are approved. That doesn't mean they're constructed. It just means they're approved. So I wouldn't say that that's all land that's been converted, but it is approved for conversion. So for the siting council jurisdictional projects, we have relatively small numbers, but they're relatively large in size. So while they make up only 6.5% of the actual number of projects, they represent 60% of the acreage of all the projects, which makes sense. And 17% of the projects that have been approved of all of those 167 are on high value farmland, and that's 20% of the total acreage. Again, just picking some numbers out. This is by no means, a comprehensive, but I thought some of the kind of interesting elements associated with that. Can you move to the next slide? So I thought I would pair that with just FSEC jurisdictional. And so what I have up here are essentially the universe of solar projects at the siting council. So you can see for the active ones, this is operational. We have only 50 megawatts, of projects that are in operation, 357 acres. In construction, 362 megawatts. So getting into the 6.6 square miles. So that's, in some form of construction. Approved but not built, 812 megawatts, so 16.7 square miles. And then, I put an asterisk on there because 3 of the projects that have been approved but not yet constructed have requested time extensions for beginning construction. So not all of them immediately go into construction. Some of them, are still waiting to go into construction, and others, have requested time extensions, like the Oregon Trail Solar we just talked about. And then under review is a big number, so 2,400 megawatts. And that is from the notice of intent stage all the way up to, getting into the draft post order stage. So just all levels of review. So 34 points, square, or 34 square miles. And then inactive, since we started reviewing projects, we had 2 projects that submitted notices of intent and then let those expire. So 2 projects that didn't get to the application stage, simply let their notices of intent expire. And then if they want to come back to council, they will have to resubmit notices of intent. So this again, kind of a comparison or a companion piece to the report, because this includes projects that are currently under review, not just ones that have been approved. So just any questions council may have on either this slide or the prior slide, or anything that was in the Farm and Forest report?
Madam Chair, just an observation that watching these trends, I think, will be really interesting, especially as we look at projects on high value farmland, and also knowing how many projects actually come to fruition. We get a lot of applications both at FSEC and at the county level that never get built. So watching those trends really carefully, I think in the next couple of years, will help us, better understand where and how we're citing things. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Brown.
Yes.
I'm Cindy Condon. So a couple questions on the Farm and Forest report. I don't pretend to know how this plays, but given drought circumstances, does that play into that report? It seems to me we've had applications for projects where people have talked about there's not enough water to irrigate. So how does that impact that report? Are there projections for, you said farm use land good for farming anymore?
That's a fantastic question, Councilmember Condon. I do not have an answer to it. I don't know if some of the other former planning directors do. If not, we could certainly ask Hillary Foote, the DLC's Farm and Forest Specialist, to add her to an future agenda, to provide some more detail or context to the report, since she's the one. She gathers the information from all the counties, and she does her own analysis and evaluation as well. So she would probably be the better one to answer that question.
I know, I'd appreciate that, just how that plays in that space. And then I have another question, just related to what we've got in construction and approved but not built. Any feelings with respect to, given the infrastructure bill? Does that, I would expect that to help, move projects through. Any thoughts about that?
It would be speculative at best
Yeah.
for me, so I couldn't say for certain. We don't, we try to keep an eye on, what are these trends? If there are tariffs, we talked about that before, which may make it more or less expensive to get solar. If there are issues of supply chains, if there are issues of access to qualified workers to get out there and do construction. So, we keep an eye on that, but we're not experts on that, certainly. But I would imagine that, just with all that caveat, that, certainly at the federal level, there's a lot of incentive trying to get more renewable projects, to, construction and operation. So, without any specificity, I would think, yes, that it probably will create some more opportunities in the near future to move projects along.
Thank you. I was just wondering, as you talk to applicants or people thinking about applying, if that's one of the things that is driving movement towards applications. For that. So thank you.
Yeah, we haven't had anybody, come into us and say, well, this is what, is one of the motivating factors for us now. I think, there's a lot of things that have to line up well for a project to go into construction. And so I'm not an expert in that. I don't pretend to be. I just know that there are a lot of elements that have to line up for that project to be a viable project to go into construction. And so I can't help but think that, investment, the Inflation Reduction Act, can't get my mind on that, would have to help in some degree.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question? Okay. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So at the September council meeting, and this is where we had Dwayne Killstone, the compliance officer, do the presentation, and we requested, both Dwayne and I had asked council members, what's your interest, in terms of seeing, information related to compliance, once a year, twice a year, or frequently. And so we heard the answer was somewhat more frequently. And so I'll just say that this is the first iteration of that. I'll explain what this is, what we intend to do, and then, if you have any thoughts or ideas, we'd love to hear it now, or in the future, we can certainly adjust. But this is sort of that first take on that. So the slide on the screen shows what we plan to include in the monthly siting report. Every month, package up, what's going on. We're going to include more details about compliance issues. We have a fairly short portion of that related to compliance now, and so we're going to have, a table like this, this information will largely be lifted from, associated inspection reports. So we want to create a whole extra workload associated with it. So we tried to create something that can really be relatively converted over easily from work that we're already doing. So in the facility column, at least in the monthly siting report, that'll be a link to the project page. So, there's a fairly sparse amount of information on here, but if somebody wants to go directly to the project page, find out a lot more details about the project, that will be a hot link, which will take them directly to that. The inspection date and type are pretty self-explanatory, and the findings and our comments reflect really what was noted during the inspection or what we currently know about that sort of particular issue that's reflected in there at this point in time. So the first one, and these are just representative examples. So what we intend to do is we'll probably have more incidences reflected in the monthly siting report, and then use some judgment during my secretary report to pull a few of those in. So not necessarily all of them. And so this is where it'll be probably a little bit of back and forth to figure out, if this is too much, you don't want this, or if it's not enough. But this is sort of an example of what we were thinking of right now. So for the first entry, which is the Northwest Naturals mist underground natural storage facility, you can see in the right-hand column, essentially what's happened for Amendment 11 is there was compensatory mitigation requirements for impacts to habitat. Those have not been successful. So they need to come up with a new strategy, a new location for those, and that's what this entry reflects. That is a fairly recent determination by us and Northwest Natural.
Excuse me,
Yes.
just a quick question on that. Is there a time frame for coming up with a new mitigation plan?
I'm gonna look to somebody else who knows more about the details than I do on that one. And so either Sarah or Wally, feel free.
I can speak to that because I was involved in that audit. They have not given us a time frame yet. They said they need time to find an appropriate property and get a new agreement in place. And what I think our expectation is if they don't have that resolved by the next audit cycle, that would be escalated. Escalation would mean notice of violation. Potentially that would be on the table as the next step.
Thank you.
The next one is the Klamath Cogen facility. So there are two elements related to this. So the first one, the certificate holder, Avangrid, or the parent company of the certificate holder, has historically included an uncertainty measurement in their carbon emission calculations, which we are evaluating to determine whether it is allowable or not. And so if we determine that it's not allowable, that'll have to be ceased to be used, and then we'll have to figure out what we do about that. So that's something that we're currently looking at. And then secondly, there was an original condition in the site certificate. They weren't the original applicant, but in the original application, there was representation made by the applicant, which then became a condition of approval, which included the use of the heat recovery steam generator blowdown as cooling tower makeup water. So meaning they could use that sort of water that's coming out of that for, which is typically would just be disposed of in a useful manner. But the chemical treatment of that makes it not usable. And that has kind of consistently been that way. And it's something that we've only recently found out. So we have to kind of figure out what we do with that inconsistency associated with that condition. So early on, we haven't come to any conclusions yet, but this is, again, sort of the information thinking about providing you so you know where we're at, where we're going with these things. So it may not be completely finalized yet. We may not have a good understanding, but at least it gives you an idea. And then a last row on this one, again, is the Northwest Naturals Mist Underground Storage Facility. There was a landowner requested inspection related to this facility. And so we conducted an inspection recently. The landowner was concerned that Northwest Natural had disposed of wastewater in one of the injection wells on the facility that was previously approved through a DEQ permit, but had expired. And so working with, several state agencies, including DEQ, staff went out there, did the site inspection, and our conclusion is that there is no evidence of a violation by Northwest Natural on this. Can you move to the next slide, please? Two very recent ones. So Portland General Electric staff on the first one, the Bigelow Canyon facility, found two hatch doors on the ground associated with two different wind turbines. So this notice was sent to us fairly recently. They did meet the 72-hour notice requirement. This has literally been this week. So that's as far as we've gotten, is received the notice and confirmed to them that we received their notice. So nothing yet has been done with that on our side. And then similarly, Golden Hills had the same issue. So Avangrid staff found a hatch door, not two, but in this case, one hatch door on the ground, and then also sent us a notice within 72 hours. So similarly, that was this week, and we're just beginning the evaluation of those issues. So that's it for the compliance updates. And again, if you have thoughts and ideas about this level of information now or in the future, again, please let us know. Want to make sure that we're, based on what council said, a little more frequent, a little smaller bites, and then probably still do, once or twice a year for a compliance update. But at that point, probably won't have as much detail because we're getting some of this on a more frequent basis.
This is Marcy. I think this is very helpful to me because then we're not waiting. And certainly when things that are happening, we should be made aware of it. So when the public will get to the meeting, then we're not surprised. I like it. Go ahead, Cindy.
Cindy Condon. I think this is terrific. I'm wondering if it would be possible, and you may not know it all the time, But if there were a projected, completion date or follow-up date included, just so we could, I remember specifically, incident with respect to dust, and it just took a long time. And if we had a projected time frame, I think it would be important. Or more important.
We'll make that note. I think when we know that, certainly. Some of these, I think we can probably, we may not have a good conclusion date, because some of these can take some time, but we can certainly maybe give you a better understanding of what's the next step and what's the time frame of the next step, if we don't have the better understanding of the whole sort of time frame of when we could get to a conclusion. I don't know. Hopefully that might be adequate enough for now.
Yeah, I guess, what, I would like is for the certificate holder, in many of these is trying to do something, and that there is a time frame for it, and that they understand that, and it will be a report to the council.
Yeah, we'll, like I said, we'll make the note and we'll start including something, and you can let us know if that's the something that you like or not.
Thank you.
Getting close to the end, future council meeting dates. So the next council meeting dates are December 15th and 16th. We will definitely need a meeting at least on the 16th. At this point, we do not yet know if we'll need a 2-day meeting or the location. We're still trying to figure out what the agenda will be. But since, we're only about 4 weeks out, we need to do that pretty quickly. So our intent is to put together, at least a draft agenda early next week, send it out to Chair Braille for her review. And then hopefully, before Thanksgiving, next week, we can then get out to council, do we need 1 day, 2 days, and what the location would be. Like I said, we're still trying to figure that out right now. And then last is the 2023 proposed meeting dates. So Nancy had reached out to council members these are typically the third Thursday and Friday as placeholders, other than if there is some conflict like Thanksgiving or Christmas holidays, or if there's a spring break kind of one. So these are reflective of that. And I know at least there was a quorum, and I think most people were available, at least for now, on all of them. So I just wanted to put this up there for council members as well as everybody else. So if these are still valid, at least we can put those out there as placeholder dates. There's, these are not locked in stone, but it does create some, certainty for people, about the dates. So we hope these will work, but we probably won't need every meeting date, and we can certainly adjust as necessary.
We seem to be very busy these days.
I know, right when I said that, I was like, yeah, we're probably gonna use all 12 of them.
Chair Graham,
Yes, sir.
those are the same ones that were sent out?
Yes,
Okay, perfect.
those were the same. Unless there's any other questions for me, that concludes my secretary.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is the West End Solar Project. This is a public hearing on the draft proposed order on application for site certificate. We will have Kellen Hardyweather, the senior siting analyst, and Allison Green Webster, the senior administrative law judge, conducting this portion of our meeting. And so at this time, I'm turning it over to Kellen.
Thank you. For the record, Kellen Tardyweather, hold on. Thank you. Chair, that's great. All right. Thank you. Good evening, council members, and Allison Green Webster on the webinar. Will be presiding over the hearing on the draft proposed order on the application for site certificate for the West End Solar Project. Again, I'm Kellen Tardyweather, Senior Siting Analyst and lead on this project. This is an informational item, my portion of the presentation, and then the hearing that the hearing officer will conduct. This is an overview of what we're going to go over tonight. I'm going to do a very brief project overview. Council, we're going to talk more about this facility tomorrow if we end up moving in that direction, and I'll go over that of like the next steps later. And then the hearing officer is going to conduct the public hearing. And at that public hearing, the applicant will be able to provide their comments or any comments that they have on the draft proposed order. In that, I'm just going to pause for a second. Council has been sent the comments received on the record as of yesterday, I think. And which did include the comments from the applicant. So council has received those. And to this moment in time right now, we also received one written copy that we have here that we can scan and email from a gentleman from the union. And then we also got a comment letter from the Department of Aviation. So that's what's come into at this moment. And again, the applicant will also receive all of the DPO comments. So after the applicant can comment on the DPO, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to comment on the draft proposed order or the application for site certificate. Then we'll open it up and council can identify any issues or have any comments, in which case after that, the applicant, and maybe might be better for the applicant to respond, but we staff can also help council navigate where information may be found in the record or how we drafted findings, recommendations, or conditions in the draft proposed order. But at the end, the applicant will be provided an opportunity to respond to any of the above. So so that's kind of the structure of the evening. And I always feel like this is like weird, and I should like turn around and talk to everybody behind me, because council kind of, this is you, council. So this is, even though I'm sitting this way, this is for the folks in the room. This is intended to be informative for folks that are new to the FSEC process. Maybe this is your first council meeting that you've been to. Thank you for coming. That's awesome. Thank you for participating. So this is really for the folks behind me, and I'm sorry that I'm not looking at you. Okay, so the Energy Facility Siting Council, or FSEC review process, is a consolidated state review process to where a developer, or we'll call an applicant, can come, and it's like one-stop shopping for decisions and permits that may apply to large-scale energy facilities in Oregon. So council has jurisdiction over several different types of facilities. Usually what we're talking about here, what council reviews, are big energy facilities, transmission lines, utility scale solar, wind. We talked about some. We had the Mist Underground facility, and we have cogen projects. So we review and have expertise over lots of different types of facilities. We have council's made up of 7 members. We have 6 with us tonight, either remotely or in person. Thank you also for being here. Our council members are volunteers, and they're governor appointed and Senate confirmed. And then myself, Todd Cornett, Sarah Esterson, Wally and Nancy over there, Odo's Siting Division staff. We are staff to FSEC, so we do technical and legal review, drafting the documents, driving to meetings, and having a blast. So that's us. Okay, so this, I know for us in the room, this slide might be a little bit hard to see. I also want to note that we did we deemed the application complete in September, and we had an informational meeting, which was noticed in the newspaper and mailed to property owners and sent to agencies in October. We had some of the landowners and folks from ODF&W show up, but the informational meeting on the complete application is really trying to set people up for this step, because this step and commenting and coming here today to comment on the DPO is an essential step in the process to be able to move forward if desired in council's process. Council's used to seeing the chevron, and I'm sorry, people in the room can't really read it. This is very typical, but this is kind of interesting because this is actually a facility that's being reviewed under council's expedited review rules, which we don't really see that often. Expedited, there's two categories of facilities that would qualify for an expedited review. The one we're looking at is, there's rules that are for expedited review for small capacity facilities. And these are facilities that are 100 megawatts or less. So the primary difference in the rules is that for a regular application for site certificate, an applicant submits a notice of intent, which is an NOI, and that goes out for public comment, informational meeting, reviewing agency comments. And then after that, we write a project order, which says, this is what needs to be in the application, and then the application process starts. There's no notice of intent for an expedited review, which is really just kind of a beginning scoping phase in the council's process. The first step, aside from requesting an expedited review and having the department respond to that, the first thing the department gets is actually the preliminary application. So after the preliminary application, then we issue the project order, which says this is what this needs to be in the application. And then we review the application with reviewing agencies and deem it complete. But then everything afterwards is the same, except there is a little nuance in there that for an expedited review, from the date of the complete application, council has 6 months to get to a final decision if there's not a contested case. We're well within that time. We deemed the application complete in September, and we're here, so we're turning it around quickly here. So we're here. The next steps I'm going to go over. Well, I will go over it now, but I'll talk later. And also the hearing officer is going to talk more about why it's so critical to participate at this draft proposed order stage. But after the draft proposed order, the hearing closes and the record closes after the hearing closes, which means that there's no more information that's added to that application to add to the preponderance of evidence, right? So once the record closes after the hearing, the record is closed. Now, if a project goes into the contested case, record opens back up, but at this time, or at the close of the hearing, the record closes. So no more information. So that's kind of going back of why applicant, public, council, and the applicant gets an opportunity to respond to all of that now while the record's open. But after the record closes, council then reviews the draft proposed order. So we have that scheduled on the agenda to be tomorrow, right? And so I was saying, I'll talk more about the facility and go through more. And that's going to be tomorrow, assuming we close record and move forward. That said, the next step is issuing, the department issues the proposed order, which is a document that responds to the comments from the public, applicant, and council. At that time, we issue a notice of contested case, and then the chevrons proceed. So very quick overview. The Weston Solar Project is, right here in Umatilla County. I think Todd and I drove by it the other day. It sounds like Hanley maybe drove by it. The applicant is EE Weston, which is a subsidiary of Eurus Solar Holdings. This is a new applicant to the FSEC process. The facility is a proposed 50 megawatt solar energy facility on a 324 acre parcel within a site boundary of 324 acres, which is kind of small compared to what council kind of sees. And it's interesting, you're like, well, why is that acre threshold? Why is it coming in front of council? And it goes into the definitions of high value farmland. And we have that peel off in the rules that is that the AVA, which is the
American viticulture area.
American viticulture area. So that's why we're here. And of course, as with most projects, the energy facility, which is a solar energy facility, includes its related or supporting facilities. And so the related supporting facilities includes battery storage, substation, switching station, and O&M enclosure, access roads, service roads. An interesting note about this site is that the applicant's not proposing a transmission line because there's 3 transmission lines that are either immediately adjacent to or cross over the facility site that they're proposing to interconnect with. So that's an interesting aspect of this site. I don't need to go through this. It's pretty straightforward. This mirrors those chevrons we saw on that slide. I think the interesting of note, so that preliminary application was submitted in November 5th, and here we are, we're doing a DPO hearing about a year later. So that's what happened. And of course, you know, like what's happening in all that time, this is us. Most of what the department and applicant are doing at this time is we're doing information requests. We're working with reviewing agencies. They're asking questions. The applicant's responding. We're going back and forth, getting that application to where the application is complete. And a complete application is not an approval. It just means there's sufficient information for us to draft findings and recommendations and conditions in a draft proposed order. So that's what happens in that time gap. And a bunch of other really exciting things, but that's mostly it. So, okay, so a lot of what I'm going to go over here is, you know, will be repeated by Allison Green Webster presiding over the hearing. So issuance of the draft proposed order, it initiates a public comment period. So there's been a 22-day comment period where folks can provide their comments either, you know, via email. We have an online comment portal. Folks can come and provide oral testimony here tonight, either in person or through the webinar. Folks can also provide comments in writing tonight. You could fax it. I haven't gotten any fax comments, but you could. Somebody could do that. It still exists. And okay. So, why it's important to comment on the DPO. If you want to participate further in the council's process, you have to comment on the DPO. The council's process, it's the contested case proceeding. It's a built-in appeal process that the council does have. I just want to note that Allison Green Webster was the hearing officer for the Boardman to Hemingway contested case. So she can speak some council standards. So that's good. And so for consideration, the contested case, an issue must be raised with sufficient specificity that the council, the department, and the applicant understand the issue and are afforded an opportunity to respond. So this is lifted out of the rules in the statute, and that's why we kind of have that organization where the applicant goes last, because the intent is that the burden of proof to demonstrate that the standards are met is on the applicant. And if somebody raises an issue that really identifies an issue of fact, or present facts that there may be a standard may not be met, or there's something missing, the applicant is afforded an opportunity to provide that or respond to it. And then in rules and statute, to raise an issue with sufficient specificity, a person must present facts that support a person's position on the issue. So this is really kind of council and the public's guidance about what sufficient specificity means. You have to present facts. So these are, and I went over this slide in the complete application. These are examples of effective commenting. So providing specific council standards or a specific rule where there may be an issue, providing specific information on whether or not a standard has been met and why, supporting facts and comments and attaching reference materials, but then also helping us understand where in that reference material there may be conflicting or supportive information, like help us understand what the issue is. And then making indicating where in the DPO or the application there may be an issue. So less effective comments are just stating support or opposition, providing a copy of a report, but actually not doing an analysis and telling us how that's supportive of a position or of an issue, raising issues that are outside of council's jurisdiction. And of course, folks can do that. There's just not anything that we can do with it or council can do with it later on, or just making unsubstantiated statements.
Kellen,
Yes, Chair Graham.
Todd can tell me if I need to hush, but I think it's important for, this is Chair Grill. I
Mhm.
think it's important for folks to understand this isn't, a tactic so we don't have to address it, but if you don't have the specificity, then you can't respond to it.
Mhm.
And I would just ask that if there's where you would direct people, like, we have on our website that they can get the information. So if you could just state that, that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. So helping people understand where to find the information?
Well, I think we've had comments numerous times during my tenure on council where folks feel like, well, I stated something, and then we say, well, you didn't meet the criteria. And so if you get on the FSEC website, there's a lot of resources that I think could help folks. And I just don't want people to feel like we don't want to respond, but there are
Mhm.
things either we legally can't,
Mhm.
because they fall outside of our jurisdiction, or that as staff, council, we can't respond to what they've said. So,
Mhm.
yes, Todd.
For the record, Todd Cornett, I think that's a great comment, question, Chair Grill. So in the notice, so we have a notice requirement for the draft proposed order. And it can be like 5 pages long. But it kind of goes through and it explains that. It articulates that requirement, about the sufficient specificity. It also includes a link to, information on our website, including the public guide. And in that public guide, we largely state what the rule and statute says. We don't go too far because we have to kind of be careful about not getting into that legal interpretation or providing legal advice. But yes, I think we certainly put that information as much as we feel we comfortably can within the notice, and then linking it to other documents on our website. We do that certainly in the notice.
Thank you.
And we do, and on the informational meeting, on the application, we do have like more slides that try to help people connect standards with, if you're interested in this is where you look. But it is a good point because for instance, there's more people in the room tonight than there was at the informational meeting. So I think in like this slide deck, we could maybe add one of like some of those slides that we do have in the informational meeting, so people see an example of at least like, if your issue is the soil protection standard, then this is what we're saying anyhow, because a lot of people don't work in rules and statutes like we do.
Thank you. Cindy?
Cindy Condon, I am curious, given this is kind of new, at least to me, the expedited
Mhm.
Nature of it. So I'm curious when the public knows something is happening. And so what would be the first notice of, I'm an adjacent
Of the
property
complete
owner?
application.
Yes, and secondly, is this an unusually short period of time for public response from DPO to now?
Well, it depends on what time frame. Because what we used to, it's 21 days. That's the minimum, has to be at least 21 days before the hearing of issuing notice. And we used to do that, several years ago, run a very similar within that time frame, or 30 days so that was very typical. But for some of our more recent projects, like we have pretty lengthy comment periods. So it's within the legal bounds, but also we haven't really had that much interest in it. So we thought that it would be appropriate.
And part of the reason I ask is could there be less interest because of this expedited process? And I don't tend to know. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, the difference, if it was a note, the public would have gotten, its notice in the very beginning. I mean, I guess it's speculative. Would more people be interested if they had one and then 6 months later they get another one, and then, a month later they get another one? I don't know.
and
But-
I'm
but-
just curious
yeah.
about the difference in the process for public participation.
No, it's just that the first time the public hears about an expedited review is at the complete application noticing.
Okay,
And usually, internally, we're trying to be more efficient with how we do our work. So really what we did with this project is while we were reviewing the preliminary application, prior to deeming it complete, and then after deeming it complete, we were actually writing the DPO. So that usually what council sees is we deem an application complete, and then we're like, okay, now we're gonna start your DPO. And then that's why there's kind of this bigger time frame. So that's also why it was a real kind of quick turnaround, because we were more like, we were ready to go.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Congrats on the quick
Madam
turnaround.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if
sir.
I may, for the record, Todd Cornett, I want to reiterate one point that Kellen made. So I think you bring up a really good question, essentially, is there enough time to comment on this? And it's a good question. It's something that we think about pretty significantly. And so it absolutely meets the minimum legal requirements. There's no question about that, but is that adequate? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And if we had had a lot of participation at the public information meeting on the complete application, I don't believe we would have probably had the same comment time frame. We would have increased it, because these are a little bit speculative. We sort of speculated that there probably wouldn't be that much interest in this based upon that information. I think that's a legitimate speculation. We could be wrong, but if there had been a lot more interest, we would have provided more comment time frame. It's not related to the fact that it's an expedited review. It's related to the interest associated with the project.
Yeah, thank you. Good point. Yeah. Ready?
Ready.
Okay. Oh, well, I'm up. So just before I pass it off to the presiding officer here, just some logistics, and I think I'll let her do it. I don't really know. I think I may just go over here because I'll be running the presentation, so I'm just gonna, I'll be here so if we need to like flip to any other images or anything, you just find out I'm here.
Well, Kellen's doing that. I will introduce myself. Greetings from the Portland metro area, everybody. I'm Allison Green Webster. I am a senior administrative law judge at the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I am the council appointed hearing officer serving today as on this matter and serving today as the presiding officer for this public hearing. We all know it's Thursday, November 17, 2022. I'll note that it is about it is 6:21 p.m. at this time. We have people attending in person at the Oxford Inn Suites located in Hermiston. We have folks appearing via video conference, and we have folks appearing telephonically. Kellen, I guess I want to check in with you and see how many comment cards you've received there.
I have two, and then the applicant, I presume, is going to, but they didn't fill one out. So I have two so far in the room.
Okay. And have other participants raised their hand or signaled that the participants that are appearing virtually, have you received any other ones?
Let me see. I think I can see her now.
It doesn't look like there's anybody online.
Okay. Well, then I'll continue on. I'll note that the purpose of this public hearing is to provide an opportunity for the public, reviewing agencies, and the applicant, if they wish to do so, present oral and written testimony on the West End Solar Project application for site certificate and the draft proposed order. As we were just discussing, or you were just discussing, we have a 22-day record of the public hearing comment period on the draft proposed order, and it is scheduled to close at the conclusion of this hearing. I don't know if there will be requests to extend that period or not, but if there are, we will address those in the hearing. At the conclusion of my presentation of what to expect in the public hearing and participating, I will call on each person interested in providing oral testimony, starting with the applicant, then the people in person, and then those any on the webinar, and then any by phone. The council members may provide comments or questions to the applicant during this process. When we have a bigger crowd, we sometimes put a time limit on the amount of time, but I think tonight, at this point, if there's only a handful or so of if there's only a handful of folks who want to provide comments along with the applicant, we'll give you the time that you need. And we'll only use the sheep hook if you go on way too long. If a council member asks a clarifying question, the time will be stopped. We won't hold that against the public member making the comment, and then we'll restart the time if need be. Okay, and this is a reminder also, we'll go over once again what Kellen had mentioned earlier, that this is the opportunity for the public to make their comment and raise their concerns, and if not raised at this time, that any concerns in the future will be considered waived. Pursuant to OAR 345-015-0220, subsection 5A and B, a person who intends to raise any issue that may be the basis for a contested case must raise the issue in person or virtually at the hearing or in a written comment submitted to the Department of Energy before the deadline stated in the notice of public hearing, which, as I indicated, was today, November 17, 2022. A person who intends to raise any issue that may be the basis for a contested case must raise the issue with sufficient specificity to afford the council, the Department of Energy, and the applicant an adequate opportunity to respond, including a statement of facts that support the person's position on the issue. To raise an issue in a contested case proceeding, the issue must be within the council's jurisdiction, raised in writing or in person, or virtually, prior to the close of the record of the public comment period, which is tonight, and raised with sufficient specificity to afford the council, the department, and the applicant adequate opportunity to respond. And one time for this time with feeling, to raise the issue with sufficient specificity, a person must present facts that support the person's position on the issue. And I understand at this point, Kellen, you have perhaps the applicant and two others who wish to make comment.
Correct.
Okay. So as I indicated, the commenters can have the time that they need to make their statements. I want to give some instructions. Prior to testifying and providing comment, I ask that you state your full name with spelling. You provide the name of the organization or group that you are representing. The title, if you're representing an organization or group, and the physical mail or email address. If you wish, and advise if you wish to receive notice of the proposed order. Okay. Kellen, do you want me to go through the requirements again, or do you think we're good?
I think we're good.
Okay. Uh, Kellen, do you want the applicant to comment first, or do you want the members of the public to go first here?
I think we had it structured where it was applicant, public, council, applicant. So
Okay.
applicant first, if that sounds okay to you.
That's fine by me. So is there a representative from the applicant present with you in Hermiston?
Yes, yes.
And if there's more than one of you, feel free to.
Yeah, you can all
them
come
up.
up.
I got it. Thank you. Hello, my name is Rob Krula. I'm a development manager with Eurus Energy America, representing the applicant, EE West End Solar, Eurus Solar Holdings LLC. Just wanted to say that we are excited about this project.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but would you spell your name? Because I'm not gonna try to get that right.
That's okay. It's
Thank
Italian. Krula, Curulla. It's on various paperwork that Odo has already. We are excited to be here representing this project. We think it's a great site for an energy project, given the existing energy infrastructure crisscrossing the site and adjacent to it. A little bit about our company, Eurus Energy America. We've been developing, owning, and operating utility scale wind and solar projects for over 30 years in the United States. We were one of the earliest developers of wind in California back in the late 80s. We've developed, owned, and operated utility scale solar in the United States for over 10 years. And closer to home here in Umatilla County, we developed, own, and operate the Combine Hills 1 and 2 wind farms outside of Milton Freewater. I'm here happy to answer any questions that come up. I want to also just mention our project is split into 2 parcels. The landowners for both of those parcels are here and they will speak as well. The western half of the project is owned by Art Pryor. The eastern half is owned by Steve and Wanda Scott, and they're both here. And thank you for welcoming us, and happy to provide any additional questions. No, any comments or answers for any questions you have. I will not provide any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Do the others on behalf of the applicant want to add anything?
Well, those are the folks, I believe, that are going to provide
Okay.
their comments.
The land.
Oh, I'm
Don't
sorry.
worry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Not that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Allison.
Okay, so I don't see anybody rushing up there. Also for the applicant. So do we go now to the like maybe the landowners or members of the public to go forward?
It looks like the 2 folks that are going to provide comment are the landowners, so I
Okay.
said yes. So Stephen Scott? And one? Okay, yeah.
She'll let me do this.
Okay.
Thank you for having, given us an opportunity to address this. My name is Steve Scott. My wife Wanda is right back there, and one of my 3 boys is interested in this, so he decided to come to this meeting. I think maybe it might be helpful if you understand the property owners and who they are. And so I want to just give you a little background on the Scott family. I grew up in Stanfield, went to school in Stanfield. My wife went to school in Hermiston. We dated in high school and got married a couple years out of high school. I went to work for Les Schwab. She told me I had to get a job. So I went to work for Les Schwab. And I like going to work for Les Schwab in Hermiston because Hermiston was home and I didn't have to go anyplace else. So, but if any of you, are familiar with the Les Schwab Company, they promote from within. And so if you want to get a promotion, you have to travel. And so I did, or we did as a family, and we moved about 3.5 years after I went to work for the company to LeGrand, got into the management program, the assistant manager program. Spent about 5 years, maybe 5.5 years there, moved to Salem, had an opportunity to be a store manager in Salem at a brand new, the old Fred, the North Salem on Commercial Street, Fred Meyer's. Fred Meyer's got out of the automotive business, and Mr. Schwab bought him out, and several of the towns around there. So I got an opportunity to go to Salem. I did not want to go to Salem. It was a big town, and I was intimidated by the bigger cities. But after about 2 weeks of driving through town, and I was just like the rest of them. Just go in and out, and off you go. We spent about 3 years in Salem. We wanted to get back to the eastern part of the area, and the company was building a new store in Kennewick, Washington. So we applied for that, got that store, spent about 4 years there, and an opportunity in Hermiston came up. So we were excited. We moved to Hermiston, bought a little place out in the country with a couple acres, and it was home. It was about halfway between where she grew up and where I grew up. So we had a good time coming to Hermiston and raising our family. We have 5 kids, and they're all excited about this West End solar project. The thing that we had an opportunity to buy some land several years ago. And with my intent was to farm this land. And I knew that there wasn't water. It was dry land. And I knew that I could, I worked when I was a kid out in the sticks where they could raise wheat up close to Pendleton on dry land. And so I figured, well, I could do it here too. So I bought an old combine. My son-in-law, their family, borders our property on the north, and they farm about 2,000 acres. You might it's a Walshley family, and they have watermelons and cantaloupes, and so any of this, you see that in stores around the country. They're big into that. My son-in-law says, "Hey, we can make this thing. We can try it." He says, "I don't think you're going to make any money, but you can try it." So anyway, we tried. We prepared the ground. We bought the seed. We planted. We put fertilizer on it in the fall, in November, October, November, and then hopefully you'll get enough moisture that stuff will grow. And we farmed it in 2013 and farmed it again in 2015. There wasn't, in 2013, we had our best crop, and we averaged 14 bushel to the acre, which did not pay for the seed and the fertilizer and the diesel fuel and all the stuff that went with that. So I'm one of those guys that doesn't actually give up on stuff like that. So I said, we'll let it summer, fall for the year, and then we'll try it again. And so we tried it again in 2015. And again, fertilizer and the price of wheat was down, and we had what I thought was a decent crop, but when it got into trucks and got to the elevators, we just couldn't do enough with fertilizer. We had to have water, and we just couldn't. And we averaged, I think, 11 bushel per acre at $5.50 a bushel at that time. And it wasn't enough to pay the expenses. So we kind of backed off the next years. And then we got an opportunity to find out about the West End Solar Project. And that was, we wanted this land to be productive and to do something for not only our family, but around the community, provide electricity, and it was, that was kind of our goal. So it was very, Rob and I kind of got in touch with each other and, went through the steps and kind of put it down on paper, and I thought, I grew up farming. That was what I did. I bucked bales, I irrigated, I drove wheat truck, drove combine, as a kid in high school, and I love that. But I couldn't make the ground that I bought productive. And my wife said, if you're gonna have a farm, you're gonna have to make a little money on that farm, so. Anyway, we decided that we would work with West End Solar and help them along. I love solar. When I look at all the forms of energy from hydroelectric to coal and all of that, solar is, to me, the best way to do it. It doesn't make any noise. It's not bad to look at, and there's no exhaust. There's no carbon. And what a great thing to do with a piece of property that doesn't have irrigation. And so, that's been our focus on it, is to try to help this process along. I thought it would be helpful so that you guys could, know the family that, and Art will be up here and tell you a nice story, better than I can. And, but I think that it's a great project. Our community, the Hermiston community, is growing. It's the largest community on the east side of the Cascades. There's 20,000, almost 20,000 population in Hermiston, and Umatilla growing like crazy. They're building houses like crazy. The schools, they've built several new schools just to take care of the population that's coming in. I don't know that they're going to run out of electricity, but having power available is going to be a great thing. And power that doesn't make noises, that is not bad to look at and doesn't have an exhaust. I think it's great. So that's kind of the direction we are. We'd love to see this project. If I thought there was anything about this solar project, and Wanda and I have talked, if we thought that this wasn't going to be a real benefit to our community and the people in Eastern Oregon, we would have never jumped on board with this. This is a great project, great opportunity. So, any questions that I could answer?
Go ahead.
No, after you.
So,
Thank you,
Mr. Scott,
Mr. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
this is Hanley Jenkins, council member. So I understand that, you attempted to raise dryland wheat.
Yes.
On the property. Had you done any investigations into irrigation water, opportunity to access irrigation water? I have your statement here.
Yes.
That says that it won't grow crops without irrigation. So
The first thing that I did when I started looking at this was to get a hold of Ray Kopax. He was in charge of Stanfield Irrigation District, and that's where the water would have come. I was convinced when I bought the land that I was going to get water. I've known Ray for quite a while. He's got a place close to where we are, and they've got a business in town. And so I went in and says, "What do I got to do to get water, Ray?" And he says, "You have no clue what you got to do to get water." And it was, it wasn't, he says, "Steve, we've got people that have been trying to get water for years." He says, there's a certain amount of water, and if you don't have water rights, you're probably not going to get water. I went through the The counselors, are the people that run the Umatilla County, and they had a kind of a program going, that they thought that they could get water. And so I worked with them for 2 or 3 years, and it just fizzled and went away because there's not any water. There's not excess water.
Okay, so this is Hanley again. So talk a little bit about, that's a ditch company. Did you investigate groundwater?
The property that we're on is Art can probably talk about this better than I can, but it's a critical groundwater area, and they won't let you drill.
Okay. So what Oregon Water Resources Department has said that,
Yes,
so groundwater resources already over appropriated, and your understanding is that you would not have the opportunity to drill a well for irrigation purposes.
that's my understanding, yes, and that's what I was told, so.
Okay.
My son-in-law is a lifetime farmer. That's all he's ever done from the time he was old enough to walk. And he knows everybody. And so I've been able to use his influence in the community to try to get some of that stuff and just hit a brick wall.
Do you farm anywhere else?
No,
Just this piece
it's
of?
my 2 acres at home. We got a pasture and we put some cows out in it again once in a while. But,
Okay.
I do not. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Cindy comment, and just really a follow-up, and you might have heard me speak earlier about drought,
Mhm.
what that may mean for other projects. But it sounds like in 2013, this was as it was even before the drought situation we have now, and you were denied water more recently? Because 2013, 2015, you weren't asking for water because you were doing dry.
I was inquiring before 2013
Okay,
from the Stanfield Irrigation District.
okay.
And also, we talked about a well, but, we run up against a roadblock with the critical groundwater.
Yeah.
Issues there. My son-in-law knows all about that because they've got property right next to where this property is. So
And I guess that situation has not gotten better in the
I would,
10 years.
yeah, I would say it hasn't gotten better for me, but
But just in terms of water, the water situation
Yeah.
has not improved.
yeah, no, it has not improved. So it would be nice if it did, but
Chair Brad, just more, this is Ann Byer for the record, just more on the water thing. I think it would be helpful if staff can get some documentation on the critical groundwater designation. And I worked in Umatilla County years ago, and I can't remember if that's a state designation or part of the county's comp plan. So just coming around, because I looked at the aerials and I thought, well, it's a donut hole that doesn't have water. How did that happen?
yeah.
And the rules changed and water is less available, but documenting the critical groundwater area would be really helpful, knowing that we know that the irrigation district can't serve
Yeah.
because there are no water rights, but that would help, really say that, no, this can't be farmed. We aren't taking away ground that could grow watermelons because there's just not enough water. So thank you.
So I have one more question for you.
Okay.
This is Hanley. We have in the draft proposed order material that we have, talks about property that is to the east and northeast that hadn't been farmed in the past, but is being farmed now. And sounds like it's being farmed with high value crops like corn and beans and so forth. Peas. So have you explored other crops besides wheat? I'm somewhat familiar. I'm from Union County.
Yeah.
We have a lot of different crops in Union County
Yeah.
and I understand wheat is one of the least demanding
Yeah.
water crops, but I was very interested that there are adjoining properties here that are farming with very similar soils, almost exactly the same soils as yours. Our information doesn't say whether it's irrigated or not, but my assumption is that it's not, and it's been recent.
Yeah.
Do you have any information related to that?
That is all irrigated.
It is now all.
Yes, it is all irrigated at this time, yes. Our two places that this West End Solar Project is programmed for there is irrigated around it, but these two places haven't had it. When I planted my first crop, there was a gentleman that worked for my son-in-law's family that was 80 years old, that was out there and helped, he was doing some work, and he come up to me and he said, Steve, he says, you're the first guy that I ever remember. He says, and I'm 80 years old. I've never seen anybody farm this ground. And I says, so why? He says, because there's no water.
So our record says, this is Hanley again, our record says that it was farmed in the 50s and 70s,
Okay.
which
and
is prior to your ownership.
Yeah, and it might have been, but I can't remember his name. But he said that he even as a kid, remembered anybody farming that ground. So. It'd be great if it had water. I'd love it.
That's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
And then next is Arthur Pryor.
My name is Arthur Pryor, ARTHUR, I, 32313 Oregon Trail Road, Echo, Oregon, 97826. I'm here to support the West End Solar Project. I happen to be one of the landowners, of course, and to kind of reiterate what Steve was saying, my land has never been farmed that I know of, and I've never farmed it. It's outside of all district boundaries. It has no water rights, and it has a large BPA line running right through it. So it has, to me, little or no income earning capacity unless I get a solar project on, or a solar farm going on it. So from my perspective, this is a really, really great opportunity to create some income and maybe some alternate source of income to help take out the roller coaster effects and the ups and downs of being in the farming business. This is, I've been to a few of these meetings before, and this is a clean energy close to the grid project. It's just, there's no transmission lines. It shouldn't affect any neighbors or any businesses. It, which is always that underlying worry that there's going to have to be a transmission line because a lot of these projects are built a long ways away from the grid. And so this is a kind of a unique project. I've testified in other cases where I ask the people, I love your project, but just don't try to create a transmission line through my farming property. So, and which is a heartbreaking situation for any farm ground or anything. So this is my opportunity to do something with this land. My banker loves this project. And we've owned this property since about 1990. There was never really an attempt to farm this quarter section. It just is outside of all district boundaries. It has no water, and it just is a futile effort to try to grow wheat. You can do it. There's a lot of new technologies these days that you can use chemicals and different techniques and no-till, minimum till procedures, but it's just next to impossible to make a living off of that ground. I'm here to support this project and do whatever I can to create a solar farm. So I'd like to answer any questions you guys have, if there's anything I can help persuade you guys to.
So this is Hanley again. I do have some questions. I'll ask you the same questions I asked Steve Scott. So do you farm other land in the area?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Um, So have you tried to obtain water rights for the property?
So that is a complicated question. The land you were referring to that's east and to the north is also part of my property that I've
Okay.
just recently developed.
Good, you can answer my next question.
So why didn't you put water on that land? So I was just talking to, so an analogy would be if you own 100 acres of real estate and you have water for 10 acres, where are you going to put that 10 acres of water? You're going to put it close to the irrigation system. You're going to put it on the most productive land. And what are you going to do with the rest of it? You just don't have an abundant source and a unrestricted source of water. It's a very it's easy for me to say you're in the sub area A. Me and Steve are in the sub area A in that area. And if I want to drill and get into the basalt layer, it's a zero start from the very beginning. They will not allow you to. It's impossible. The state wants us off of all of our groundwater. I don't know if you can grasp that concept, but they really do not want us to be pumping it. And there's an SAY in the sub area A, and they are restricting that a little bit more all the time because the groundwater keeps going down.
So you say you own the property to the east and the northeast, and that's referred to in our materials.
I think you were referring to it when you were talking to Steve.
Right.
That some new developed land, yes.
Yeah, and so is that land irrigated?
Some of it is.
Some
Some of it is, yes.
And that it isn't irrigated, is it cropped?
No,
It's not cropped.
no. The part that isn't irrigated was in CRP and it expired. And trying to develop as we go along and
So the high value crops that are mentioned in here, corn and so forth, are irrigated crops. They're on those parcels. They're adjacent to this subject piece.
no, I don't understand adjacent. Well, they're adjacent, they're connected across the road, but they are,
Right.
So we're gonna try to bring a map.
Here's one of them. So that they.
Talking about this right here, right?
yes.
So even though that is now irrigated,
No, it's really actually not.
but it's that.
So there is some sections connected to that real estate. If you were to get a map that would cover 2 miles square that is being irrigated.
And that's where you're growing those, the things.
I developed some real estate and I leased it out to a guy who's growing organic stuff and so.
So let me run by you what we've got here.
Okay.
It says, and this is under windblown ranches. And it says, tax lots east and northeast subject of the site boundary has historically not been irrigated and was uncultivated. However, recently, these tax lots have been planted with peas, corn, and potatoes. So what that says to me is the same soils as your property are producing peas, corn, and potatoes, but this doesn't say whether that land is irrigated or not. So for me, I need to know if I'm gonna approve an exception to taking this land out of an agricultural zone and authorizing it for solar development. I need to know whether or not it could be used for agricultural purposes. And part of being used means it needs to be, you need to be successful. It needs to be profitable. And so, I appreciated Steve's comments about, I said, we didn't make any profit from this production. But peas, corn and potatoes are high-value crops. And if they could be grown on this parcel without irrigation, that's very important to whether or not I can agree with this exceptions to statewide planning goal 3. So I need to know either from you or from somebody, the applicant, whether or not those adjoining properties are productive.
So that's a very complicated question. To be outside of a district boundary is not a good thing. To try to be included in that district boundary is a very, very long. It's almost next to impossible. It has to be I'm not so sure the state has to be involved. I'm not so sure the Bureau doesn't have to be involved. And I've been in this area farming for 36 years continuously, and I've never seen or heard of anyone actually, an irrigation district, including land that hasn't been in their district ever before. It just doesn't happen. There's probably a more detailed explanation than that, but even if there was water in those districts, they are extremely reluctant, or it's next to impossible to try to ask them to include land that is not in that district for the simple reason that everyone else is going to want to be included. Because, throughout history, farmers have migrated to areas that had less water but better production capabilities, better ground, and those things just don't change very easy.
So let me see if I can re-ask the question.
Okay.
So the property immediately across the road to the east and to the northeast, I'm being told is in production now, and that it is growing peas, corn, and potatoes. Is that land in the district, and is it being irrigated? Because it wasn't at some point, apparently.
Okay. So that land had been dryland farm. We bought it in 1990. It was kind of a blowy, we called it windblown ranch because it just had lots of blows out through it. You could hide an aircraft carrier out there if you wanted to in a couple of cases. But getting back to that first analogy, you have 100 acres and you have water for 10 acres. So to try to sum up a long history, the Port of Umatilla had some municipal industrial water rights. There was a long process with a lot of lawyers and a lot of talking to the state about, and the port and the county about turning some of that municipal industrial into agriculture. That was partially successful. And as a result of that, I attained some of that water on a 30-year lease from the port that expires in another 25 years. And my analogy of my 10 acres is that part of my real estate that you were just describing. And that real estate is my 10 acres of my 100 acres, and there's no more water left that I can attain. So I'm using my allotment of water close to the canal or close to the pipeline that and a larger mass area in order to expand. I'm using that in the best production way I can.
So is part of it under cultivation that is not irrigated?
No, none of it is.
So everything that's under cultivation is irrigated? Thank you.
Did I explain that well enough? Because it is kind of confusing.
We got
That-
it at the end.
Did okay.
I got it. I got it. I understand what this statement now. Because my concern was that if there was adjacent land that was not irrigated, that was under cultivation in peas, corn, and potatoes, then why couldn't the subject property be under peas, corn, and potatoes and not be irrigated? I think, since the soils are the same, and all the only difference is one parcel is on one side of the road and one's on the other. As long as, it was not irrigated and producing, then the subject property should be able to be producing as well. And it's very integral to the explanation, the reasons why this land should be taken out of agricultural production and agricultural zoning and used for, in this case, a solar farm. So it's very important to me to know whether or not there is a capability, not whether it is, but a capability to produce agricultural products. Oregon's land use program doesn't regulate agricultural practices. It provides the opportunity to conduct agricultural practices through its exclusive farm use zoning. And what we're being asked to do in this process is to essentially set that aside. And there have to be reasons why that happens. We allow that to happen. And so what I'm trying to explore with you and Mr. Scott is what are those reasons? Because they're not clear in the material that I have. And so I need additional reasons, and we need it on the record. So that's why I'm interrogating you, so that we have it on the record as a part of this process. So thank you very much.
You're not interrogating me at all, then please. It's really hard for me to make a connection because water in this area is if you don't have irrigation, it is very, very futile to do anything. I mean, you just can't raise corn and peas and potatoes on anything. We just don't get any rainfall around here. So it's just, it's kind of strange to talk about it in those contexts because it's such a vital point. I mean, it's a no starter if you don't have an irrigation system and or water to access that ability. And the restraints and the restrictions with the irrigation districts are just, it's really almost impossible to do those type of things. So.
Yeah, I understand that, I'm on the other side of the mountain from you. We get more rainfall. We have a lot of dry land and crop activity.
Yep.
Over there, we have alfalfa, we have wheat, we have a number of high value crops that are grown on lands that aren't irrigated. We have a lot of irrigation too.
Yep.
And Water Resources has done the same thing to us and said, no more groundwater wells in your alluvial materials. If you want groundwater, you got to go all the way to the basalt. And because you're in a groundwater limited area, you can't even do that here. So I understand all that, but what I have to be clear on, what the record has to include for me, is that this land couldn't be farmed without water. And so it's important that the adjoining property isn't being farmed without water. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
So Chairman, if, this is Ann Byer for the record, if we can just, to Councilmember Jenkins' point, really look at our exception findings to make sure that we fully explore the cropping patterns in this part of the county. So the extension people will tell you what can be grown in this area and what can't without water. And then again, looking at that, I think it's a water resources designation, that's a critical groundwater area. And I think there's information in the record. I think I read about the irrigation district being unwilling to serve, just to really get to the whole issue of taking a goal 3. Goal 3 is the exclusive farm use statewide planning goal, taking an exception from that, because that's a big deal. So anything we can do to build up the record on that based on the testimony we got today and then probably additional info. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor.
Am I done? Okay, thank you.
All right, Kellen, have you received any other comment requests?
Not in person, and Nancy indicated that it doesn't appear that anybody else is on the line.
Okay. Does the applicant want to add anything more?
There's questions, and there's questions around. Should you clarify what you mailed to us? Because we'll provide that to council. We'll provide it. It would just be nice if you could summarize what it is.
Hi, my name is Leslie McLean. I'm with Tetra Tech, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant. And just speaking to the East Improvement District, which is the irrigation district that some of Art Pryor's properties are in particular, the ones that were discussed in this last, during his testimony with Councilmember Jenkins' questions about some of the area in the properties to the northeast and the east of the site boundary that have been recently improved with irrigation and some crop cultivation. I sent a document to Odo staff earlier today that is as close as we've got as far as the request for a map to show the East Improvement District. This document lists all the properties that are in the East Improvement District, and it's signed and notarized by all the property owners. And I pointed out which pages of this document that Art Pryor's properties are listed, and you will see the tax lots listed for the properties nearby that we were talking about that are in the improvement district, but you will note that the tax lots that are involved in the site boundary, both the Scott's property and Art Pryor's property, are not listed in that document that defines all the properties in the East Improvement District. So it's evidence as far as what properties are included in that irrigation district. Okay.
Thank you. Sure.
Yes.
I'm Cindy Condon, and I do have a question for that applicant, whoever wants to answer it. And it's just related to the ownership and the LLC and your other projects. So for the wind projects and solar projects that you already have, are those all operated by LLCs? I'm just curious about the arrangement and limited liability company, how that's managed and.
Yep. So, yeah, it's very, so the answer to your question is yes. Every individual project has its own individual LLC. That's the, corporate structure that's used for every single project, not just by us, but by all other developers and project owners. Just for simplicity of administration and project financing.
And a follow up on that. And I'll just ask one question.
Okay.
So as the council, should we consider that the parent company is really the operator of the project? We've got an LLC for purposes of financing. I get that. Other than that, is it the parent company that we look to for
purposes of expertise, developing, operating project, for financing, for being able to construct, for having personnel that have the knowledge base to do all those functions? Yes.
Thank you.
That was easy.
There might be more,
Nope.
maybe. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, is there anybody else that's,
I'm just gonna. Wait, she doesn't. Oh, I'm sorry. Patrick, the parcel map, this one. Oh, oh. Oh. It's here, it's 134 pages, so I need to figure out. Just.
There it is. Folks is asking.
So let me jump in so we don't have a side conversation.
Yeah.
So the question here is really evidence and when the record closes. Council has asked several questions. And if the record closes tonight, we have some limitations about being able to add what council's interested in the record. So the question that we're sort of struggling with is, can we add it after the record's closed? Can it be added tonight? Does the record need to remain open if that information needs to be submitted into the record? So I think once we probably go into the next phase and we have sort of council questions, it might be helpful to re-articulate what your interests are in terms of the things that we've talked about. And then that way, that specific information that any council member is interested in, we can sort of deal with that, and again, see if we already have it in the record, if the applicant is able to provide it tonight, fairly reasonably, or if they need to request the record to remain open, or council wants for, Ms. Webster would like to, hold the record open for us to gather that information as well. So we're just trying to make sure that, we run these things very clearly. And again, as I think the value of having this opportunity is to make sure that, at least the applicant has the opportunity to provide sufficient evidence in the record, if they choose. But we just want to make sure that that's clearly articulated, so there's no questions about it later on after the record closes, and maybe we're not able to add that to the record.
So, and
Yes, and
So since I'm the guilty party asking for additional information.
I mean, I think it's fine. We just want to be
But
clear.
I think the Umatilla, East District information answers one of the questions. It tells us where the water came from for the property to the north and the east. And it sounds like that has been submitted by the applicant for the record. And I know there was language about the irrigation district in the draft order, the draft proposed order. I just don't remember anything about the critical groundwater area. So that's my specific ask, is to just be able to document that.
So I'm sorry, for the record, Kellen Tardyweather. So as we've been going here and as Leslie McLean on behalf of the applicant came up and gave that summary, I have it up on the screen now of the, I'm not exact, I can't really see. I don't really know how to paraphrase this document, but that verified the irrigation district tax lots, what has water, what doesn't. So that document is here. It has been submitted. She just also sent me a map from the area of critical water concern from Oregon Water Resource Department. So we have that. And then we also have the oral testimony from the landowners in response to the concerns that Councilmember Jenkins had. So that's to the issues that have been discussed. That is technically what is added to the record, that then we will be able to bolster those findings.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then as far as like council's kind of been asking the questions throughout, I know we had it kind of structured as anyhow, so I'm not really sure where we're at, but I'm council can kind of take it away, or the hearing officer can.
let me does council have any other questions for the applicant or anybody that gave comment tonight?
excuse me, sorry.
I have statements. I don't know, I have questions for the applicant.
I'm
Okay,
kind
well,
of the same.
all right, well, which of you would like to go first? Whatever issue.
I'd be happy to go first. Is that okay with you, Ms. Webster?
Sure.
Are we at that point?
Sure.
Okay, so let me be clear. We're done with.
I'm sorry, but,
from people in the room and from the people that are on virtually, we're now going into the phase where it's the council's opportunity to make comments. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
and do we want to, okay, so Mr. Cornett or Mr. Rowe, if you could, or Kellen, is this part of the hearing or are we going to close the hearing?
Yeah, Judge Webster, this is part of the hearing. This is how we structured it.
Okay.
The next stage would be if council members have any specific questions or comments that they would like to make. And then at the end, it would be the applicant's opportunity to respond.
Got it. Okay. Got it. So, and I'm sorry, Mr. Howe, go ahead then.
It's okay.
This is Hanley Jenkins. I was the one that was.
Oh, okay.
To go first.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here's where I'm at. And I think it's important that this is on the record so that the applicant has an opportunity to respond if they so choose to do so. And so I'm having difficulty with the Energy Facility Siting Council Rule 3 exception that is currently part of the draft proposed order. And whether or not it's adequately addressed and satisfies that goal exception requirement. The goal exception does require that the applicant explain with reasons why this property is going to no longer be available for agricultural use and why it should be available for the solar facility. We have identified through administrative rules some suggested reasons, areas of reasons that could address the reasons exception requirement. And I'm struggling most difficultly with the third one, which is on page 70 of the draft proposed order. And it's the minimum direct impact on agriculture within the subject tract. I think the landowners have gone a long way to help me understand why this land shouldn't be available for agriculture, but I still feel that we need some additional reasons why this land should be taken out of the opportunity for agricultural production. Yeah, my notes here. So there are 235 acres of arable soils on the subject properties out of the 360. And I'm not as concerned about the high value designation for the farmland. I understand that viticulture designation is for essentially the whole county, Umatilla County, and maybe adjoining counties as well. I am more concerned about the arable soils being taken out of production. We have the now LCDC Farm Forest Report that identifies that we have prior approvals that have identified 7,601 acres of arable lands that have gone through an exceptions process that have been taken out of agricultural production. That's a lot of land. And I have been asking applicants for the last several applications to do a better job of giving us reasons why. We actually helped in the Nolan Hills application to provide better justification through our adoption of a condition of approval. And so I think we now have some better information on why this land isn't available. But I still think that the applicant needs to provide a better justification and reasons for why this land would no longer be available for agricultural use. That's my comments.
Thank you.
Judge Webster, this is Kent Howe. I'd like to make a few comments as well. I came to this hearing tonight fairly confused with the information that was in the record. And we, as Counselor Jenkins mentioned, we kind of tried to get the message out to applicants that when you're taking an exception to goal 3, it's a big deal. It's a very high standard, and we need the adequate factual findings so that we can make conclusions of law that'll stand up on any contest. And there's information in here that basically it seems it's primarily a position that the site hasn't been farmed and it's not irrigated to justify the exception. But when we get into the record that we have before us, well, it was farmed back in the 50s and 70s. It was farmed as recently as 2013 and 15. And I really appreciate Counselor Jenkins pulling out the information and the testimony from Mr. Scott and Mr. Pryor, explaining more to us about the problems with that. But what we had in the record wasn't that. And so we've got that now. That really helps a lot. But I think we have, you know, there's the surrounding farmland that's irrigated. There was concerns with the transmission lines, the Pacific Power and the Bonneville, that pivot systems couldn't work. Well, in the record, we have maps that show the pivots, the irrigation is all working, and the farms are growing wheat and potatoes, corn, alfalfa, watermelons, and grass seed, all high value crops. And I think the applicant needs to take the time to provide us, to clarify and get these findings accurate. I really appreciate the testimony tonight. That helps a lot. But I think to get my support on this, because this is so important, I don't want to set a precedent where future applicants submit information that's all confusing and we kind of try to button it up and make it so we get there. I think if the applicant can button this up for us, it'll be a lot better in the long run. That's what I hope for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howe.
Cindy Condon, and just a little bit more explanation for my questions earlier on the organizational structure. What I had difficulty with is reconciling, the LLC is a Delaware corporation and a limited liability company. And under the corporation and under that, there are limitations to the liabilities, responsibilities, whatnot of the member, of the parent company, of the member. And I appreciate what we've done in this DPO with respect to the performance guarantee, and I appreciate certainly stepping up and really taking that on. We've gotten deeper and deeper into it. And I guess I am still a little bit hesitant. We've done a good job protecting the council and the state, certainly, I think. And I'm just wondering about the liability to others in the area that may object to the project or something that could go wrong, and how the parent company might step in, just exactly what you said to me is that we can rely on the parent company. And so that's just something I struggle with. I'd like us to get better at really identifying that and defining what we expect of the parent and that it be agreed to by the parent company in light of the Delaware Act. So. A little further explanation.
Can I ask questions?
I think, so for the record, Todd Cornett, I think we, well, I mean, certainly you can, if you want to have that and come up and they do have the opportunity to respond to any of these comments, and that'll be sort of the last part of it. But, like a little more back and forth, that's your purview. But I would say we probably want to make sure that we get all of the comments first, and then they can come up and respond to all of them one by one if they choose to.
Any other comments from council members?
Looks like there are none in the room.
Okay. So now it's the applicant's turn to respond to the council members' comments.
We have 5-minute recess to discuss what we might like to do with the record.
Yep. We take a break.
Okay.
Yes, please come back in 5 minutes. The time is now 7:20.
5 minutes? Sarah, do you want 5 or 10?
5 is fine.
Please be back at 7:35. Oh, sorry.
This is a preliminary comment.
Sure.
Okay. So what I'd like to outline for the applicant and the landowners is the reasons that I feel that the goal exception hasn't been satisfied. I feel that we've gone a long way tonight to understanding why there isn't water available to the property, either through the district or through the groundwater limited designation. We have now new information in the record that supports that. But I still am not convinced that the property can't be used for dry land agriculture. In spite of Mr. Scott's comments, I think we need a demonstration of a regional demonstration of why this property isn't available for dry land agricultural production. And I think that would help support the arguments for the justification, reasons, exceptions for the goal 3 exception process. There's one other thing that I was, but I think that's the most important piece. I do, I appreciate the testimony we've gotten this evening, and it makes a lot of difference. It goes a long way, but I think we still have one piece out there yet that needs to be substantiated. And I would encourage the applicants to try and make a better effort. Thank you.
And is there a request to extend the comment period to a time later than the end of this meeting tonight?
This is kind of like, if the applicant feels they can address it this evening, great. But I'm going to leave that up to the applicant to decide whether they want to extend the hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. All right. Is there somebody from the applicant that would like to respond to the council's comments?
Yes, good evening. For the record, my name is Sarah Stoffer Curtis. I'm legal counsel to the applicant, West End Solar. That's Stoffer, Stauffer, Curtis, Curtiss. I'm with Stoll Reeves Law Firm. We appreciate all the comments we've heard tonight, and in light of the many questions and the comments, we would like a limited, to keep the record open for a limited period to address these comments. I believe we can fully address all the issues that were raised tonight, and would suggest that we keep the record open for 2 weeks from tomorrow. So that would be the December 2nd, so the Friday following the Friday after Thanksgiving. And that would give us an opportunity to respond to these questions and more fully address some of the issues that were raised.
So, Judge Webster, if I may,
Please, go ahead, Mr.
for
Cornett.
the record, Todd Cornett. So just to clarify, because there was, some language talked about extending the public comment period. I know Ms. Curtis clarified that limited. I just want to be clear that, it would be leaving the record open solely for the purpose of allowing the applicant to respond to any of the comments tonight, but not leaving the public record open, just the record. I want to be clear, because if anybody's listening or hears this, making sure that leaving the public comment period open means that anybody can kind of comment. So just for limited purposes of the applicant to respond to comments tonight. So just wanted to have that on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Cornett. Okay. Would council like, I guess, Mr. Cornett, is it my call or is it council's call to do this?
I would say, because you're, up for the record, Todd Cornett, I would say that because you're the one in charge of this public hearing, Judge Webster, it's your call.
Okay. Given the comments and concerns raised by council tonight and the very sort of specific points raised by council, I think it's appropriate and to leave the record open for the limited purpose of allowing the applicant to respond to the concerns raised by council members tonight. And I think that the requested 2 weeks from tomorrow, which is December 2nd, is a reasonable request, and I will grant that request to leave the record open for that limited purpose. Does the applicant wish to add anything more tonight while we're here in this meeting?
They're shaking their heads no.
Okay. Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cornett, but I believe my work here is done for the night. I will conclude.
Yes.
Okay. I will note that it is 7:42 p.m. on the 17th of November, and the public hearing part is closed for this, and the record will remain open till December 2nd for the limited purposes that we discussed.
Okay.
Thank you, Judge Webster.
All right.
And
Well,
do you need me to stay on the line or not?
No, I believe we're going to recess now until tomorrow morning.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
okay, this is Chair Grail, and again, I'd like to thank the applicant and the members of the public for coming to participate in this hearing. On behalf of the council, I'll just say that it's important to all of us that we have these types. I mean, I know we're required to have this one, but we'd like to make sure that we get to come to where these projects are cited and to hear. So thank you for participating. The time is now 7:43. And the November 17th, 18th, 2022 meeting of the Energy Facility Siting Council is now recessed until tomorrow morning at 8:30. I'm paying attention, 8:30. Thank you.